Welcome to the Traitors, a Traitors podcast. My name's Matthew, and I'm a writer, reality competition TV fanatic, and a 100% faithful. Promise. This season of the podcast is dedicated to the UK series of The Traitors, and this is a special episode of the podcast for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's the last episode of this season, more on what's coming next later, and secondly, and more importantly, this is a bonus episode devoted to an interview with someone very special. A few weeks ago, I was able to have a lovely, insightful chat with Sam Watts, the composer of the score for The Traitors. That brilliant theme music you all know now, that's the fantastic work of Sam. I've been dropping mentions of this interview into several episodes now, and I'm really excited to let you all hear it. Without further ado, let's dive in. My special guest today on The Trader is musician and composer Sam Watts, whose work you will have heard on BBC's Planet Earth, The Sarah Jane Adventures, Wizards vs Aliens, and of course, the reason you're listening to this podcast, presumably, The Traitors. Sam, welcome to The Trader. How are you doing today?
Hi, Matthew. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Glad to be talking to you. Now,
likewise.
I foolishly assumed, because of your accent, that you were somewhere in England. However, you're much further afield. Where do we find you today?
I am. I actually live in Canada. So I live in Alberta, so sort of west central. We live in the subarctic desert, which is great fun. So it's really, really cold at the moment, and lots of snow. We have snow for about 5 or 6 months of the year. It was a big change from the UK. I lived in the UK until 2021, and we moved over here then. So yeah.
I see. Now, I have so many questions to ask you about your work on The Traitors, but before I do, I'm going to introduce our podcast game, The Trader Traitor. Our aim, Sam, for the rest of the interview is to sneak in one lie to one another. This has to be a fake fact or a fabricated story, big or small. It can't be a fake opinion, like saying your favourite composer is Philip Glass when actually it's Sporty Spice. At the end of the interview, we'll put our traitor hunting skills to the test and see if we can detect one another's lie. Sam, does that make sense?
It certainly does.
Excellent. And that begins now. So, to start with, I've got quite a big question, I reckon. It's a question that might help anyone listening who wants to work in your field and do the kind of thing that you do. How did you become a composer for film and TV?
Well, the long or the short version. There are many routes in. For me, I was very lucky. I was studying music at university, and I studied under a fantastic, very well-respected man called Mervyn Cook, who has written one of the definitive books on film music. And I was very lucky that he had a friend who was a guy called George Fenton, who listeners may or may not have heard of, but he's a very, very big British composer who did things like Blue Planet and films like Hitch and Gandhi and Cry for all sorts of stuff. And he came to guest lecture, and my tutor was very, very kind and said, to George, will you have 10 minutes to chat with this kid? He wants to kind of do what you're doing. And so I chatted with him for a bit and ended up writing my dissertation on the music to the Blue Planet, and then poked him a lot, like really annoyed him for a very long time while writing the dissertation, asking him if he had a job available for me. And he got really annoyed and said, if you get a first, then I'll give you a job. So I waited for my results to come out, and I managed to scrape a first.
Hooray.
Did I phone my mum? no. I phoned George. I was like, I got her first. And he was like, oh, okay, then I guess you can start in September. So I went and worked as George's music assistant, and I was there for about 3 years. And it was quite the introduction. It was working on the first film I was working with him on was a film that was directed by Richard Eyre, and we went on to do things with Stephen Frears, and I was, helping with Will Young recording vocals on a film and drinking champagne with Judi Dench, and it was very, very strange. And then after about 3 years of doing that, he called me into his office and he was like, don't come back in January. And I was like, really scared. But he sort of said, you've got to go off and do your thing. And I didn't know what to do because I'd been working for someone else for 3 years. And little did I know that in March he was going to call me and say, I have this little TV show and I can't do all the music. And that little TV show was Planet Earth.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So my first ever TV credit was on a flagship BBC natural history documentary series, which at the age of what was I, 23, 24, it was kind of a big surprise. And then from there it was just, finding jobs with other people because I had a credit. So
yeah. Oh, that's incredible. So we're at the end of awards season for film right now, and we're recording this the day after the Oscars, where Volker Bertelmann won the Academy Award for Best Score for All Quiet on the Western Front. Firstly, did you watch the Oscars?
I didn't, no. I don't tend to watch the award ceremonies.
And have you seen All Quiet on the Western Front?
No, I haven't, and I do have to. And Volker and we share a publisher. I know Volker, and it's a well-deserved win. I know that much. He is brilliant. But no, I haven't got around. Actually, I haven't watched quite a lot of the films that were up for the Oscars this year. I haven't had time.
Well, what I really wanted to ask was, what are, in the past year or so, what are the best scores for film or TV that you've heard? Is there anything you've listened to and thought, wow, that's really caught my attention?
Do you know, I absolutely adored Natalie Holt's score for Loki. I think that was brilliant. I also, although it's not all new, I really, really enjoy Nick Harvey's music for Hunted, the Channel 4 TV series. I have to admit, I did listen to some of Hunted for inspiration for the Traitors. And Isabel Waller-Bridges' score for I always get them the wrong way around. The fox, the horse, the mole, and the boy, whichever way around it goes.
The animated. Yeah. Which just won an Oscar last night as well.
It did.
Yeah. So, Sam, where or when or how were you approached about scoring The Traitors then? I'm assuming it was after it was filmed, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it was... they were in pre-production for it. I was writing the music as they were filming and editing, and we were doing lots of back and forth. But this one of the producers, Abby Lambrinos, is a very old friend of mine. I've known her for over a decade now. And basically, we used to have the same local in Hertfordshire where we lived at the time, and we became friends because we had the same pub that we drank in. And at the time, she was working for a production company back then, and she's gone on to just be amazing and become this really successful producer. And we've said for a long time, we must find a project to work on together. And then at the beginning of last year, she just sent me a Facebook message saying, I'm working on a show and I think you'd be great. Have you got time to do it? So we had a chat, and then I met up with the other producers and did a little demo for them of what I might do for the show. And then, they asked me to do it. So it's great.
I see. The reason I assumed you wrote the music after it is because of the names of some of the tracks, like Parting Gift. But were they named, after?
So the on the cue sheets, on the things that are submitted to the TV, to PRS and stuff from the TV channels and things, none of those names appear. They've all got different names. And then James from All 3 Media, the parent company, got in touch saying, we want to release an album of the music. Let's put together an album. So we did. And then we renamed all the tracks from the show for things that resonated a bit more with the show, because they were a bit of a trade secret here. They were called really exciting things like Tension Bed and, Cliffhanger and stuff. So they didn't really have good punchy titles for an album. So I was very grateful to some of the contestants for some of the very, either the fun things that they did on the show or the fun things that they said on the show that I could, do things with. It was actually my husband's idea to call it Parting Gift. So I have to give him credit for that. That's right.
A writing credit.
Yeah.
When did you see the finished show then? How early did you get to actually watch it?
After everyone else. I didn't see the finished thing until it had already aired in the UK. So I had to avoid spoilers like crazy.
And what were your impressions of it? Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. Do you know, it's really strange. I'm not a huge reality TV fan. I love a good game show, but I've never been a massive fan of reality TV. It's just like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it doesn't tend to resonate with me. But we knew that this when they were explaining it to me, and I got to see the Dutch version before I worked on the show. It's such a different way of doing it. It's not, although it's really strange, isn't it? Although it's all about backstabbing and treachery and murdering people at night, it's really nice. Like it's got this, the thing that works, especially the British version, I think, is the way that the contestants all really came together for the challenges and worked as a team as best they could. And it was very clear that they all kind of liked each other, but then they had to go off and do these horrible things at night. So that made it really, really compelling. And having Claudia Winkleman is obviously every person's dream. We love Claude. And it was just so well made. The production values were really high. Everyone I have been very lucky in my career I have almost exclusively worked with people who are hugely passionate about what they do, and put everything into making the best possible production. And this was no exception. All the people at Studio Lambert were just amazing, and they really, really threw everything at it. I was so impressed at the quality of the entire production. It's a great show. I have to admit, I am slightly obsessed with it myself.
And it's become, hugely successful. It's been a big hit. Did you get the sense when you were working on it that it was going to be huge, or was it when you watched the finished product? So at what point did you think, oh, this is really going to take off?
I don't think any of us thought it was ever thought that it was going to take off quite as much as it did. When I saw little clips of it, I thought, this, I mean, they're pushing this, right? Like, my mum sent me a text like, I've just seen a trailer for Traitors on the BBC. And so I knew that they were going to, you know, sort of hype it a little bit. But it wasn't until, I think, maybe the second or third week that it was airing, when there was just the internet was on fire, basically. And I thought, wow, okay, yeah, this is pretty successful. And then at Christmas, when it hit 28 million views on iPlayer, and I think we've just all of our heads basically exploded. I don't think you can ever know how successful a thing is going to be. You hope it's going to be successful, and you hope people enjoy it. And when you're making it, you're like, you're making it thinking, gosh, I really hope everyone enjoys watching this and takes from it, you know, something positive and all the rest of it. But you never really know. So yeah, it was a pleasant surprise just how successful it became.
Yeah, I had the same reaction as a viewer, that I obviously loved it. And I mean, I've created a podcast about it, but I thought that it would be one series and done. So I tweeted about it saying, oh, this is amazing. It's going to be one of those shows that doesn't even get another season. I've since deleted that tweet, but yeah, I loved it, but for some reason didn't think other people would. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are like 20 something different productions of it globally now. It's madness.
Yeah, which is good for me, because it gives me lots of material to record about it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to learn lots of languages though.
Yeah, exactly. How many musicians then did you work with, Sam? Are you, throughout the recording process, are you there every single step of the way, or do you write and just send music off to, how does it work?
Well, it might surprise you to know that it is me and my brother. That is it. There are sadly no live musicians on the score at all. It's all created in computers. Or my brother has like a huge wall of like analog synths, 80s synths and stuff. He's like SH-101 and all sorts of really cool gear that when I lived in the UK, I used to go to his and we'd muck around on them and record them for scores and stuff. But now we do all of that remotely. But yeah, it's the only actual live instruments are his guitar. He plays the guitar on it, and the synths that he did. Everything else is programmed in a computer. So on this one, it was it's interesting having to do it that way. I would have loved to have recorded with an orchestra, but the timing just didn't really work on this one because of the way that I was having to write, along with them editing and things. Reality TV and game shows and things like that, they're really very, very tight schedules and quick turnarounds. So sadly, we didn't have the chance.
I see. I did sort of wonder that, but then I didn't want to ask you and insult you, and you say, how dare you? We worked with a 50-piece orchestra for this. So that makes sense. Then, how long? You said that, timing's tight and there are constrictions. How long did the whole process take from you first finding out about it to it all being done?
I first found out about it, I think, in February last year. I started writing in April. And then I was working sort of in fits and starts because I'd have to sort of wait a bit for the next stuff to be needed, and then, you know, back and forth and all of that stuff. And I think I delivered the last bit of music at the end of October, beginning of November, end of October, I think. So yeah, it took up a good chunk of 2021. No, 2022. What year are we on? Yeah, 2022. Gosh, I don't even know where I am.
I wanted to ask some questions about particular pieces themselves. Firstly, the big, you know, the opening theme. What to me it felt, it really captures like the intensity and the severity of the program, but also a sense of action and excitement. It almost sounded like it could be an Indiana Jones or an Avengers soundtrack. What were your inspirations for that theme, that central theme?
Well, thank you. That's high praise. I was given a few things by production to sort of reference points of what they kind of, the music that they liked, which I won't name any of it because it might be a trade secret within the production. But they pointed me at a few different sources of the sorts of things they liked. And then they just, you know, they told me what the show was about. And then I did that theme actually came from my original pitch to them. I spent a few hours playing around, coming up with ideas. Any of your listeners who are creative will probably understand that a lot of the time you don't have a clue where this stuff comes from. You're mucking around at the keyboard or you're doing whatever, and you're thinking about, obviously you're trying to think, right, okay, I'm thinking murder and treachery and lying and all of that stuff. So I know that I'm going to be in a minor key, or I'm going to, you know, there are certain elements of framework there. But then it just sort of, it kind of turned up. And I knew I wanted something that was kind of big in Hollywood and ever so slightly over the top, you know, a little bit more dramatic than you might normally get on this kind of show, just to help make it slightly different, you know.
Now, I've obviously listened to the music watching the program, but I've since been listening to all of it. And what's really clever to me, and I'm not a musician, so I'll do my best to try and describe what I mean here. There's this central motif that returns throughout pieces like Playing Detective, when it becomes more playful at that point. And then there are some tracks like A Stab in the Dark, You've Been Murdered, and there, that same melody or motif, it becomes more almost reflective and quite unsettling. How do you achieve taking the same set of notes, I suppose, but making it feel different in different pieces of music? How do you achieve that?
There's lots of different techniques. I think you're talking about the little sort of 4-note hook, the bum ba ba da dum ba ba da dum ba ba da 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 dum, that, which was actually a secondary thing that I'd come up with in the pitch, and then when I redid the theme, I made it a bit more integral, and production were like, "This is brilliant. We love the hook." So that kind of became the thing for the show. But yeah, there's all sorts of different things you can do to change it. You can change the harmony underneath it. You can change the tempo, so the speed at which it's played. So in Stab in the Dark, for instance, the opening piano of that, which actually was my brother playing around with the theme, he changed the harmony underneath it, and he slowed it down so that it was sort of a bit more reflective to open that cue up. So yeah, it's just about, doing using different instruments to play it, different, in the theme and in some of the bigger pieces, it's a lot of very short string notes playing it, which gives it that driving kind of slightly aggressive feel.
Yeah.
But if you play it a bit softer on a piano or, something like that, then it can. And one of the things that I was always taught when I was learning how to write music was that if you listen to the great themes from film, they're hugely versatile. You can do all sorts with them. So, that's the thing I always have in mind when I'm trying to write a theme is can I manipulate it? Can I change it so that it has a different feel so that it can be used in different situations?
You mentioned a few specific instruments there. Now, I'm going to ask a question from my untrained ear. In Cloak and Dagger, it may be in more than that. Is there a harpsichord sound?
It's actually a plucked piano.
Okay.
So it's very, very similar to a harpsichord, but it's playing the strings of the piano rather than using. So for people who don't know how a piano works, you've obviously got the keys. You hit the key, that mechanism pushes a hammer that hits the string. So it's normally strings that are hit with a hammer, but that was actually a plucked straight on the strings in the piano. And
are there any other unconventional sounds or instruments that you used that people might not expect?
I don't think we did anything particularly unconventional. There's a lot of synths, so there's a lot of electronic stuff behind the orchestra doing all sorts of I wanted to make it a lot of the music almost like the stuff you hear on film trailers, so there's lots of what in the industry we call things like Brahms, and there's all sorts of technical terms, but there's lots of synthesized stuff that was all the patches were made specifically for the show. But yeah, not a huge amount of unusual. So I didn't like bring in crumb horns or any weird kind of stuff like that. No, not really.
You mentioned film trailers there, and actually that sort of leads on to my next question, which was a lot of the score feels very cinematic to me, especially pieces like A Traitor and Our Mist. Is that? Do you consider the form when you're writing a piece of music? Does the fact that it's for TV or film make a difference, or is it really not important?
To me, it's not hugely important. It's about whatever the project you're doing needs.
Yeah.
Because you could do a film score you could do a film score with a string quartet. You could do a really small. If it's a small, intimate film, then it doesn't need a 150-piece orchestra. So it's not so much about whether it's for film or for television or whatever. It's about what you're working on and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve with it. So for Traitors, for instance, it's a big ridiculous show in a Scottish castle, and everything people are being, I'm not, no spoilers just in case, but people are having to do these challenges that are big and sometimes quite scary and all the rest of it. So I knew that it had to be kind of dramatic and filmic was one of the things. When I was talking with the producers, they said that there were going to be all of these beautiful shots of the Scottish countryside and the Highlands and things, and that it was very expansive and gonna look very epic. So I knew that I had to sort of reflect the bigness, as it were, in the music as well.
As well as being quite filmic, some of the music even sounds like it could be sci-fi to me, like the Round Table, Parting Gift. I think it's because there's a sense of they build to a climax, and it also then made me think of video games. I wondered if have you ever worked on video games, or is that something that you would like to explore?
I haven't done any video games, but I would love to. And it probably sounds sci-fi because I'm a massive sci-fi nerd. Like, I love sci-fi stuff. I'm also a child of the 80s, and all of my music has an 80s influence. So, and I think probably the use of a lot of the synths and stuff lend it that kind of slight sci-fi vibe. And I've done a lot, the Sarah Jane Adventures, Wizards versus Aliens, both, kind of sci-fi shows, really. Yeah. So I always kind of bring that in. I'd love to score Star Trek or something like that. That would be a dream.
Yeah. Something else that they use in the show is essentially pop songs. They've got these sort of eerie covers and reworkings of older music. What did you think of those choices? Did you have any favourites there?
They were really good. I kind of loved the Blondie, Heart of Glass, Philip Glass mashup, which was just like so left field. It was really cool. They did some really, really clever stuff with those, and that was again, hats off to the edit team, because the picture editors did all of the music editing as well, and which is unusual. Especially for them to be so good at it. They're a very, very talented bunch. They did a really good job of the music editing. They made some fantastic production, made some very, very good music choices. Some of the like the trailerized version of Toxic is cool. That was actually one of the things that sort of, I don't know, just as I was starting to write, was mentioned as something that might be used and that they really liked. So, that was cool. But they did a really good job of finding music that kind of matched in with the tone that I'd sort of set musically for the show as well. And it was because it was a huge team effort. It was because we worked really closely together to make sure that everything was sort of on brand.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you've watched the US Traitors.
I did.
There's different music there. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it's a very different show. It didn't have the same feel, and I think that that's part of the beauty of the format, is that depending on the cultural aspects of whichever country are making it, it lends itself to being manipulated slightly towards whatever viewers' preferences are in that country. And I think the American one was a lot less collegial than the UK one. And I think that's partially, to do with their preferences of, things like Survivor and all of those sorts of shows. And the change as well of having, a mixture of celebrities and non-celebrities was an interesting format choice, which I think worked really well, because they automatically set them up to have extra tension, people who have done this before and people who haven't, and that sort of thing. So it was really interesting.
So I'm guessing the recommission of the Traitors for a second season as good news for you?
I hope so. I mean, it's good news because I assume they'll keep using my music. I'm hoping they'll come back to me and ask for some more. But I don't know whether they will. It would be great. So, Abby, call me. But yeah, it is good news. And I know that the US and the UK versions used my music. I don't know if anyone else has used any of my music yet, but we'll see. Yeah. But yeah, I can't really complain that it's gonna carry on for another series at least. That's what we always hope. We always hope that things go on to, be made again. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely not complaining.
I can't imagine them changing the music. Not at all. It's too connected to the show for us. They can't change it. That can't happen. Can you tell us then, what are there any projects next for you? Is there anything that you're working on right now?
I am working on an audio drama that is actually it's a spin-off of a spin-off. It's called Rani Takes on the World, and it's a Big Finish production that follows the life of Rani Chandra, who was one of the main characters in the Sarah Jane Adventures, after she has been on the Sarah Jane Adventures. So we're doing that at the moment. There are a couple of other things that I can't talk about, but it's it's all good. I can't complain.
Excellent. Now, before we conduct our own banishment and conclude our game, Sam, maybe you could tell us, where can we find you online? Where can people listen to the score from the Traitors?
They can listen to the score from Traitors on basically whatever their favorite streaming service is. You can also buy it from a couple of different places, like Apple Music, if you so wish. Yep. And online, I am most active on Instagram. So you can follow me. I am I_is_Sam. Yeah, that's kind of it, I think.
Great. And I'll put links to those in the show notes for the episode on people's podcast platforms. Sam, it's time for us to see if we can detect one another's lies. We have been playing the Trader Traitor. Ooh. Ah. Did you tell me a lie at any point during this interview?
I did.
Okay. I told you a lie as well.
Oh.
Do you want to guess my lie first?
I don't think I can. You're very good at this. Everything you said sounded very believable.
Are you conceding? Are you giving in?
I am. This is why I'm not on the Traitors, because I would be terrible at it.
My lie was, it was very small. I lied
was it that which one did you say? One of the Spice Girls is actually a I don't know.
Oh no, that was just me trying to be funny. My lie was that I had tweeted when the Traitors came out that I thought it would not last more than a series, and then I had to delete the tweet. I made all that up.
Fair enough.
I didn't do any such thing. I knew it would be a hit straight away.
So what do you think? What do you think my lie was?
Your lie. Okay, I've written down a couple of options. I'm going to go with. I think it was quite early on. Was it about the pub in Hertfordshire that it was the same pub as your friend who was the producer?
No, that's actually the truth. That is exactly how Abby and I met. No, it was.
You fooled me.
It was very early on. I snuck it in really early on. It was actually. I said that when I worked for George, I was drinking champagne with Judi Dench, which sadly I never got to do. I did work on a film that the wonderful Dame Judy was in, but I never got to meet her.
Was Will Young in that film as well?
He was, yes. I did meet Will, and he was adorable. He was just like the nicest man.
It was... See, the thing is, I remember that film, so when you said that, I thought, oh, I know what film he's talking about, which made me believe it. So I thought, oh, that's not a lie.
That's why I chose that. That's why I chose it as a lie.
Well, you got me. You
Excellent.
fooled me. You have betrayed me. Sam, it's been such a treat to have you as a guest. Thank you so much for joining me in the Trader. Have you had a good time?
I've loved it. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, listeners. I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Sam. He was so nice to talk to, and I just loved hearing about Sam's career and how the process of writing the music for the show worked. I highly recommend listening to the soundtrack on Spotify or Apple or wherever you stream or download your music. It's so cool hearing all of those pieces of music again. And make sure you follow Sam on social media too. Well, like I said at the beginning of the episode, this is the end of this season of the podcast. This is the 26th episode, which I can't quite believe. I've loved talking about my favourite show, and I felt so lucky to talk to Nikki, Ivan, Faye, and Andrea, I should say, this season, as well as, of course, Sam Watts, and all of my lovely, lovely guest co-hosts, Lindsay Chisholm, Andy Rutherford, Sanji Lago, Ian McKinstry, Andrew Hall, Stephen Ripley, Joe Usher, and David Bloomberg. As for the future of the podcast, the next stop is the Traitors Australia. I've said it a couple of times in these past 26 episodes, but I think this version of the show is actually my favourite. I was hoping by now there would be a legitimate way for UK Traitors fans to watch this in the UK on TV by now, but alas, no channels have bought the rights to broadcast it yet, even though I have contacted the BBC to ask about it. However, obviously, Australian listeners have access to the show. Hello, Aussie listeners. And the show is available on Peacock in the USA. Hello, USA listeners. So I'm going to forge ahead. I'm planning on releasing the podcast in a slightly different way for this next season. Keep your eyes peeled on social media and your podcast platform for details. I'm hoping to get things running ASAP, and the next season should be with you in May. I already have some Australian Traitors contestants lined up for guest spots, which I'm so excited about. I've been away on holiday for a couple of weeks, and I'll be away again on a couple of trips quite soon. Hello, Eurovision in Liverpool. And what was a nice surprise whilst I was away was another coffee.com donation from Mary. Mary, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. If anyone listening would like to help me keep the podcast going for the next season and contribute to the podcast software costs that I'm paying, you could take a wee visit to coffee.com. The address is ko-fi.com/MATTHEWKEELEY, and you could put in a one-off donation if you can afford it. For now, thank you to everyone who's been listening to the podcast. I really appreciate all of the streams and downloads and social media follows. Speaking of which, you can find me on Twitter at @TheTradeHourPod or Instagram at @TheTradeHourPodcast, or you could email me thetradehourpodcast@gmail.com. Until the next season of the podcast, as always, stay faithful.